There are moments when life no longer makes sense, not because you've failed, but because everything false in you is beginning to fall away. You can't find the words, you can't hold the mask, you can't carry the weight of who you were trying to be, and it feels like collapse, like grief, like spiritual confusion. But what if it's none of those? What if it's a passage? You cry in private. You pull away from people who once made you feel safe. You stare at the ceiling, wondering if you've lost your way. But something inside knows this is not the end. It's the threshold. The person you built to survive is crumbling, and that is holy. That is necessary. That is sacred. It's not that you're falling apart. It's that the architecture of your false self is being deconstructed so your soul can rise. What you feel as broken might actually be your becoming. Because before the soul emerges, the ego must surrender. Before you can hear the truth, the noise of your performance must dissolve. This isn't failure, it's formation. You are not lost, you are being found. Carl Jung taught us that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, does not begin in clarity. It begins in collapse. The ego, once firm and structured, begins to crack. The roles you played, the expectations you met, the identity you wore like armor, they all begin to feel hollow, exhausting, false. And you wonder, what is happening to me? Jung would say, you are being introduced to the self. The self is not the image you show the world. It is the whole of you, shadow and light, instinct and spirit, pain and purpose. But to reach the self, the persona, your social mask, must fall. The illusions must shatter. The tower must crumble. Just like the tarot's tower card, symbolizing sudden disruption, divine demolition and painful truth. Your life begins to fall apart only so it can be rebuilt in truth. Only the wounded physician heals, Jung said, and that's what you're becoming, a healer of your own fragmentation, not by putting the pieces back as they were, but by allowing something entirely new to emerge from the wreckage. This isn't about recovery, it's about rebirth. The voice in you that cries, I don't know who I am anymore, is not weakness. It is initiation, because when you no longer cling to who you were, you finally make space to become who you are. After the collapse, there is no applause, no answers, just silence. And in that silence, you grieve a version of yourself you thought you had to be. This is the withdrawal of the persona, the mask you wore for survival, the achiever, the pleaser, the one who never felt enough, the one who performed stability while falling apart inside. Now that performance has ended, not with a scream, but with a whisper. I can't do this anymore. And that whisper is sacred, because beneath the noise of identity lives your soul, quiet, waiting, ancient. This is where the sacred pause begins. You no longer rush to fix. You no longer beg to be understood. You no longer hustle for worth. Instead, you become still. Not because you know what's next, but because you finally stopped pretending to know who you are. In this archetypal silence, you return to the raw material of your being. It feels like nothingness, but it is actually the birthplace of everything real. Carl Jung spoke of this descent not as regression, but as transformation. You are not dissolving, you are preparing to be remade, not in the image the world demanded, but in the shape your soul remembers. So sit here, let the silence hold you. Let the unknowing sanctify you. This is not your undoing, it is your initiation. The Bible is not afraid of collapse. It does not glorify endless strength. It sanctifies the breaking. Think of Job, a man stripped of everything, not because he was guilty, but because his transformation required it. Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Job 13:15. This is the spiritual paradox. You lose what kept you standing so you can learn to walk in truth. Or think of Jesus, not only the cross, but the Garden of Gethsemane. where he wept, where he broke, where he said, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." Matthew 26:38. God does not rescue us from every collapse. Sometimes he meets us in it and rebuilds us from the ruins. The Israelites wandered the desert for 40 years, not as punishment but as purification, as preparation, as the shedding of the false, so they could enter what was true. "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" Isaiah 43:19. That new thing begins where the old self ends. This is not the death of your destiny, it is its beginning. You're not being buried, you're being planted. God tears down the tower, not to destroy you, but to set you free. And in the silence after the fall, he speaks not to the ego, but to your essence. The pain no longer screams. The silence is no longer frightening. What once felt like death now feels like space, holy, vast, honest space. You begin to breathe differently. You feel emotions rise without shame. You stop rushing to fix. You stop apologizing for existing. This is what it means to rebuild in spirit. Not by recreating the old scaffolding, but by allowing a new foundation to form. You don't know exactly who you are, but you know you are no longer who you were. And that's enough. Carl Jung said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." That's what you are starting to feel, the secret order inside the collapse. What shattered was not your worth, but the illusion that it depended on your performance. What died was not your light, but the mask that dimmed it. What left was not your truth, but the version of you that could never hold it. And what remains is sacred. God does not always rebuild us with answers. Sometimes he rebuilds us with stillness, with slow awakenings, with quiet confidence that comes not from achievement, but from presence. You don't have to go back. You don't have to explain. You don't have to perform. You are being made whole, not by becoming perfect, but by finally becoming real. This is your resurrection in slow motion. This is grace doing its deepest work. This is what healing sounds like when you no longer need the world to hear it. If these words met you in the middle of your undoing, know this: you are not alone. You are not weak for falling apart. You are brave for letting go. You are wise for not forcing the old self to survive. This was never your end. This was your unraveling into something sacred. The mask didn't fall by accident. The identity didn't shatter in vain. Your soul has been aching to breathe outside the cage of performance. And now, you're not rising back to who you were. You're rising forward into who you were always meant to become. If you feel this truth sitting in your chest, if your pain has softened into reverence, if your collapse has become holy ground, write in the comments, "I'm not broken, I'm being rebuilt in silence." Let others see that healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like falling. Sometimes it sounds like quiet. And always, it feels like coming home.